The rain had been falling since dawn, steady and cold, the kind that makes a small town feel even quieter. Inside the neighborhood grocery store, the hum of fluorescent lights mixed with the soft beeps of the checkout scanners. People shuffled in with damp jackets and tired faces, just trying to get through another grey morning. Anna was at the register again. She had been working here long enough that the rhythm of it felt automatic. Scan, bag, smile, repeat. But today her smile felt heavier. She hadn't slept much the night before, worrying about the rent and her mother's health. Still, she forced herself to meet each customer with kindness, because in a world that often felt rushed and indifferent, that was the one thing she could control. That was when he appeared. An older man, maybe mid-60s, stepped hesitantly into her line. His jacket was thin, too light for the weather, and his shoes looked worn down at the heels. He placed only a few items on the belt: a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a small bottle of cough syrup. Anna noticed the way his hands trembled slightly as he set them down. She rang up the total, her voice soft, and then she saw it, the way his face shifted, first searching, then panicking. He patted his pockets, one after another, checked inside his jacket, then his back pocket again. Nothing. His expression turned pale, embarrassed. I must have left my wallet at home," he murmured, his voice so quiet Anna had to lean forward to hear him. Around them, the line of customers began to fidget. One man sighed loudly, another tapped his foot, impatient. The old man swallowed hard and said, "I'm sorry, could I just leave the groceries here and maybe sit for a moment until the rain eases up?" His words carried a mixture of shame and hope, as if he was already bracing himself for rejection. Before Anna could respond, a woman in line muttered under her breath, not quietly enough, "Some people really think they can just walk in here and get handouts. What a joke." The old man's shoulders hunched as if he wanted to disappear. He turned slightly, his gaze dropping to the floor, ready to retreat. And in that moment, Anna felt something stir inside her. It was a mix of memory, of empathy, and of quiet defiance. She looked at the small total flashing on the screen, then at the man's trembling hands, and she knew what she was going to do. Anna's fingers hovered over the register keys for a moment. She could feel the tension from the line behind him, the impatience pressing like a weight on her shoulders. But her eyes stayed on the old man. His cheeks had flushed a deep red, and the way he kept his head down reminded her of someone trying not to be seen. She glanced at the screen. The total wasn't much, just a handful of dollars. And yet here was this man, shrinking under the stares of strangers as if he had committed some crime. "It's all right," Anna said gently, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out her own card and swiped it before he could object. "I'll cover it." The man's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "No, please, I can't let you do that." But Anna cut him off softly. "It's just a couple of dollars. You need these things more than I need the money." For a second, silence hung heavy around them. Then came a scoff from farther back in line. "Oh, look at that, playing the saint now." A few people exchanged glances, some smirking, some whispering. Anna felt heat rise in her chest, but she didn't waver. She handed the bag of groceries to the man and met the room with a steady voice. "Kindness isn't weakness, and it isn't shameful." The words weren't loud, but they carried. The whispering stopped. Even the impatient man tapping his foot looked away. The old man's lips trembled as he took the bag from her. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't know what to say." Anna gave him a small smile, the kind that carried more weight than words. "Just stay warm out there," he nodded, clutching the bag to his chest as he walked toward the door. The bell above it jingled softly as he stepped out into the rain. Anna stood there for a moment, watching the drops slide down the glass. The line behind her shuffled forward, but her thoughts lingered on the man's hunched back as he disappeared into the storm. Something about it stayed with her, even after the register beeped again, calling her back to the next customer. By the time Anna's shift ended that evening, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The streets shimmered under the glow of streetlights, puddles reflecting neon signs from the small shops along the block. She pulled her jacket tight around her, exhausted from the long day, but her mind kept circling back to the old man. She could still see the way his shoulders slumped as if the world had forgotten him. The way he looked at her, torn between gratitude and shame. She had seen plenty of customers in need before, people counting out coins, people putting items back one by one when they didn't have enough. But there was something different about him, something quieter, lonelier. At home, their apartment was dim, the single lamp in the living room giving off a soft yellow glow. Her younger brother sat hunched over his homework at the kitchen table. Their mother lay curled on the couch, coughing into a worn blanket. Anna set down her bag, knelt by her mother, and brushed the hair from her damp forehead. The sound of that cough tightened her chest. She knew the prescription was running out. She also knew payday was still days away. After helping her mother back to sleep, Anna opened her wallet. Inside were just a few crumpled bills and a faded photo of her parents from years ago. She stared at the money, tracing the edges with her thumb, and exhaled slowly. There was no regret for spending what she did at the store. Still, the weight of it pressed down on her. She sank into a chair by the window, listening to the faint sound of traffic outside, the steady drip of rain against the sill. The world moved on, indifferent, but she couldn't shake the feeling that today had been more than just another shift, that somehow the choice she made, just a few dollars, a simple gesture, was going to matter in ways she couldn't yet understand. The next morning, Anna slipped into the break room at the store, still rubbing the sleep from her eyes. The coffee in the communal pot was burnt and bitter, but she poured herself a cup anyway. She needed something to push her through another long shift. As she sat down to tie her apron, two co-workers whispered near the sink. Their voices weren't loud, but they weren't exactly careful either. "Did you see what she did yesterday?" one of them said. "Yeah, swiped her own card for that old guy, like she's some kind of hero." The other chuckled. "Bet she thinks he's going to come back and reward her. People like that don't even tip." Anna kept her head down, tightening the knot in her apron. The words stung, but she didn't rise to them. She had learned a long time ago that speaking up often just gave people more to laugh about. A moment later, her manager, Brian, walked in. He was a broad man with a permanent frown carved into his face. "Anna," he said, his tone sharp, "my office now." She set down her cup and followed him. His office smelled like bleach and stale paper. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "You don't get to decide who gets free groceries in this store," he said flatly. "This isn't charity." "I paid for it," Anna replied quietly. "That's not the point," he snapped. "You embarrassed your co-worker, and customers don't want to see scenes like that. It makes them uncomfortable. Next time you keep it professional." Anna met his eyes for a long moment, steady but calm. "What's unprofessional about treating someone like a human being?" Brian's jaw tightened. "Don't test me. You're here to scan items, not lecture customers. Just remember that." She nodded, more to end the conversation than to agree, and left the office with her chest tight. The fluorescent lights buzzed above as she walked back to her register, the same rhythm waiting for her: scan, bag, smile, repeat. But the man's face from yesterday stayed in her mind. No amount of whispers or warnings could erase the simple truth she felt when she chose to help him. By the time Anna made it back home that night, the apartment smelled faintly of damp carpet and reheated soup. The place was small, just one bedroom, a worn couch in the living room, and a kitchen that always seemed too cramped. It wasn't much, but it was all she and her family could afford. Her younger brother sat at the table, hunched over his homework, chewing on the end of a pencil. He looked up as she walked in. "Mom's been coughing a lot," he said quietly. Anna set her bag down and hurried to the couch. Her mother lay curled under a thin blanket, her breathing uneven, a damp towel resting on her forehead. Anna knelt beside her, brushing back strands of hair stuck to her face. The cough racked through her chest, deep and painful, the kind that made Anna's stomach knot. "Did she take her medicine today?" Anna asked. Her brother shook his head. "She said she wanted to save it, just in case." Anna bit the inside of her cheek, fighting down frustration. She knew the prescription was almost empty. And she also knew the refill cost more than she had in her wallet. After settling her mother back against the pillows, Anna walked into the kitchen. She opened her wallet on the counter. Inside were a few wrinkled bills and a couple of coins. that was it. Not enough for rent, not enough for medicine. Just barely enough for groceries if she stretched it right. She stood there for a moment, staring at the photo tucked behind the cash. It was faded from years of being carried around. Her parents smiling on a summer afternoon, her father still alive back then, her mother healthy and strong. Her throat tightened. She folded the photo back into place and closed the wallet carefully. Anna reheated a pot of thin soup and poured it into a bowl for her brother, making sure he ate before she sat down herself. She pretended she wasn't hungry, telling him she'd already eaten at work. When he finally drifted off to bed, Anna pulled a chair to the window and sat there in the quiet. Outside, the rain tapped against the glass again, softer now, almost like a lullaby. She wrapped her arms around herself, exhausted, but her mind kept circling back to the old man in the grocery store, his trembling hands, his lowered eyes. For a moment, she wondered if he too went home to someone coughing on a worn couch. If maybe he knew what it was like to carry more weight than one pair of shoulders should ever bear. Sleep came slowly that night. Anna lay on the couch beside her mother, listening to the shallow rise and fall of her breathing. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of a passing bus outside and the tick of the old wall clock. As she stared at the ceiling, a memory slipped in, uninvited but sharp. She was a child again, maybe 10 years old, holding her mother's hand in the middle of a crowded farmer's market. Her mother had been tired that week, working extra shifts, but insisted on going to buy fresh produce. Anna remembered the moment her mother suddenly stumbled. The basket she carried clattered to the ground, apples rolling in every direction. People glanced over, then walked around them, some even stepping over the fallen fruit as if nothing had happened. Her mother collapsed onto the pavement, her face pale, her breathing ragged. Anna had cried out for help, but the crowd kept moving. She had never felt so small, so invisible, standing there with tears streaking down her face. And then, out of all those strangers, one woman had stopped. She wasn't dressed well, her skirt was frayed at the hem, and her shoes had holes. But she knelt beside Anna's mother, offering her a bottle of water and draping a shawl over Anna's shoulders. "It's going to be all right," the woman had said gently, her eyes kind. She stayed until Anna's father finally arrived, until her mother was safe. Anna never learned the woman's name, but that single act of kindness etched itself into her memory, like a promise she couldn't forget. Now, years later, sitting in a dim apartment with barely enough to get by, she thought of that woman again. She thought of how it felt to be seen, even for a moment, when the rest of the world turned away. And she understood with a quiet certainty why she had reached into her pocket for that old man in the store. It wasn't pity, it wasn't charity, it was simply her way of keeping that promise, passing forward the kindness that had once saved her. 2 days later, the store was quieter than usual. The morning rush had passed, and Anna was stacking gum and candy near the register when she felt someone lingering at the end of her lane. She looked up and her heart gave a small jolt. It was him, the old man from the other day. His jacket was the same, still too thin for the cold, but this time he held himself a little taller. In his hands was a small envelope, folded neatly, as if he had smoothed it a dozen times before walking in. Anna offered a gentle smile. "Back again?" He nodded, shuffling closer. I wanted to find you, to give this back." He extended the envelope toward her, his hand trembling slightly. "It's the money you paid for me. I didn't sleep well until I could return it." Anna glanced at the envelope and then back at him. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "I told you, it was no trouble." But he shook his head firmly. "I need you to take it, otherwise it feels like a debt." His eyes searched hers, not demanding, but earnest. For a moment, Anna hesitated. Then she reached out and took the envelope, sliding it beneath the counter. She didn't do it for the money, but she could tell it mattered to him. "Thank you," he whispered. Then, after a pause, his voice grew quieter. Would you let me buy you a cup of coffee sometime? Not here, just a simple thank you." Anna blinked, caught off guard. Customers rarely remembered her, let alone invited her anywhere. She studied his face. There was no arrogance there, no hidden agenda, just a man who wanted to sit across from someone who had treated him like he mattered. She found herself nodding. "All right, after my shift." The old man's lips curved into a faint smile. For the first time, he looked less like a stranger and more like someone carrying a story of his own. The bell above the cafe door jingled as Anna stepped inside after her shift. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, just chipped wooden tables, the smell of fresh coffee, and the quiet hum of a radio playing old songs in the background. She spotted him right away. The old man was seated by the window, a cup already in front of him, his hands wrapped around the warmth as if he needed it to steady himself. Anna slid into the chair across from him. For a moment they simply sat there, the silence soft but not uncomfortable. "I'm James," he finally said, his voice low but steady. "James Harris." "Anna," she replied with a small smile, "though I guess you already knew that from my name tag." He chuckled quietly, the sound rough but kind. "True enough." He paused, then looked down at his coffee before speaking again. "I used to teach. Literature mostly. High school kids. That was a long time ago." Anna tilted her head. "A teacher? You don't look like someone people should be ignoring." James shrugged, a faint sadness in his eyes. "When you get older, people stop seeing you the same way. It's as if you fade into the background." She thought of her mother, coughing on the couch, and felt a pang in her chest. "I get that," Anna said softly. "Sometimes it feels like the world only sees what you're missing, not who you are." They talked for a while longer, about books he used to teach, about the way students would groan at long essays but secretly love the stories. Anna admitted she hadn't had much time for reading lately, but she remembered how much she loved getting lost in novels as a girl. James smiled faintly. "Maybe I can lend you a few sometime. Stories matter. They remind us we're not alone, even when life feels small." For the first time in days, Anna laughed. A real laugh that loosened the tightness in her chest. It surprised her how easy it felt, sitting across from this man she had barely known a week ago. As they parted, James looked at her with quiet gratitude. "What you did for me. It wasn't just about coffee. You reminded me that dignity doesn't vanish with age. That means more than I can say." Anna walked home under the streetlights that evening, the cool air brushing against her face. She felt lighter somehow, as if that small act at the register had opened a door neither of them had expected. The next week, Anna found herself back at the cafe with James. It had become their quiet meeting place after her shifts, a corner table by the window where they could talk without rush. She had started to look forward to it, even if she didn't want to admit that out loud. They were halfway through their coffee when the bell over the door rang. A young man walked in, tall, maybe in his 20s, carrying a backpack slung over one shoulder. He froze for a second when his eyes landed on James. "Mr. Harris?" the young man blurted out, disbelief on his face. James looked up, startled, then recognition softened his features. "Ethan, is that you?" The young man grinned, pulling out a chair without waiting for an invitation. "I can't believe it. You were my English teacher, sophomore year. You used to read us Steinbeck out loud when nobody else would. I still remember it." Anna watched the exchange, her chest tightening in a way she hadn't expected. The way Ethan's voice carried a kind of awe told her James wasn't just some man the world had passed by. He had mattered, and still did, in ways he probably didn't see himself anymore. Ethan leaned forward, his voice lower now. "You know, I almost dropped out back then. But your class, it was the one place I felt like I wasn't invisible. You always said stories could save people. I didn't get it at the time, but now I do." James's eyes glistened and he cleared his throat before replying. "I'm glad you stayed. I always hoped you would." Anna sat quietly, her hand wrapped around her cup, but her thoughts swirled. She had seen James as a lonely old man, overlooked at the grocery store, yet here he was, suddenly revealed as someone who had quietly shaped lives, who had carried meaning far beyond what she had imagined. When Ethan finally left, James leaned back in his chair, almost embarrassed by the encounter. "I didn't expect anyone to remember," he admitted softly. Anna shook her head. "You made more of a difference than you realise." For a long moment they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that needed no words. Outside, the sky was clearing, a hint of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Later that evening, after Ethan had gone and the cafe had grown quieter, James sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. His hands, still wrapped around the warm cup, trembled ever so slightly. "I didn't think anyone would remember me like that," he said at last, his voice softer now. "It's strange, Anna. You spend years pouring yourself into people, never knowing if it mattered at all. Most days you assume it didn't." Anna stirred her coffee with a spoon, watching the ripple on the surface. "He remembered," she said gently, "and he carried it with him. That means something." James's eyes met hers, and for a moment they seemed sharper, steadier. "So did you," he said. "You carried it too. The way you treated me in that grocery line, that was not just kindness, it was courage. You stood up in a room where people wanted to look away. That's rarer than you think." Anna shifted uncomfortably, not used to being on the receiving end of praise. "I just didn't want him." She paused, catching herself. "I didn't want you to feel small." James nodded slowly. "Exactly. That's what people forget. Dignity isn't about money or titles. It's about being seen, and you gave me that when I needed it most." The words sank into her chest, heavy but steady, like a stone finding its place in water. She thought of her mother lying on the couch at home, of her brother trying so hard to hold everything together. She thought of how often she herself had felt invisible. James leaned forward, his tone almost like the teacher he once was. "Anna, kindness has a way of circling back. Not always right away, and not always in the way you expect, but it comes. It always comes." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe he was right. As they left the cafe, the night air felt lighter. The streets were still wet, the lamps casting pools of golden light on the pavement, but Anna's steps didn't drag the way they had the night before. Something had shifted, though she couldn't yet name it. All she knew was that a seed had been planted, and part of her hoped James was right, that kindness really did find its way back. The following week, Anna was halfway through her shift when her manager appeared by her register. His expression was tight, the kind that told her nothing good was coming. "Office now," he said flatly. Anna felt her stomach drop. She handed off the lane to a co-worker and followed him through the narrow hallway. The office smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, the buzzing light above flickering slightly. Brian, her manager, didn't sit down. He leaned against the desk with his arms folded. "Corporate is cutting hours," he said, his tone clipped. "We have to let a few people go. I'm sorry, Anna, but your name is on the list." The words landed like a punch. "Let go?" she asked quietly, as if saying it louder might make it more real. Brian's eyes flicked away, as if he didn't want to meet hers. "It's nothing personal. You've been reliable, but we have quotas. Someone had to be cut." Anna's throat tightened. She thought of rent. She thought of her mother's medicine, of her brother's school supplies. Her paycheck wasn't much, but it was the thread holding everything together. Without it, the ground beneath her life felt like it was crumbling. She stood there for a moment, gripping the strap of her apron so hard her knuckles went white. Finally, she asked, "When?" "End of the week," he said. "Finish out your shifts. You'll get your last check on Friday." Anna nodded slowly, forcing herself not to break down in front of him. She walked out of the office, the hallway suddenly feeling too narrow, the air too heavy. Back at her register, she tried to keep her smile in place for the customers, but her chest felt hollow. Every beep of the scanner echoed like a reminder of how little control she had left. That evening when she got home, she didn't say anything right away. Her brother was at the table again, scribbling on his homework, and her mother was curled under her blanket. Anna slipped into the kitchen, opened her wallet, and stared at the nearly empty bills inside. Her hands shook as she closed it. For the first time in a long time, she felt the edges of panic creeping in. She had been holding everything together for so long, but now the thread was fraying. And yet somewhere deep inside, the words James had spoken at the cafe echoed back. Kindness has a way of circling back. Not always right away, but it comes. She wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. But sitting there in the dim light of her kitchen, it felt impossibly far away. 2 days later, Anna sat at the kitchen table, staring at the eviction notice that had been slipped under their door. Her mother was asleep on the couch, her brother was still at school, and the silence of the apartment pressed down on her like a weight. She ran her fingers over the paper, trying to steady her breathing. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She almost ignored it. Bill collectors and telemarketers had been calling more often, but something made her pick it up. "Hello," she answered softly. "Is this Anna Bennett?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is the office at Jefferson High. I'm calling because we've had a recommendation for you to apply for a position here, an assistant role in our English department. It's part-time but steady. Would you be interested in coming in for an interview?" For a moment, Anna thought she had misheard. She pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "Wait, me? Who recommended me?" There was a short pause before the woman replied, "Mr. Harris, he said you'd be a good fit." Anna's breath caught in her chest. She whispered her thanks, confirmed the time, and hung up. She sat there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the phone as if it might vanish from her hand. Her eyes burned. She thought back to the grocery store, to the small act she had almost second-guessed. $2, a moment of compassion, a choice most people wouldn't have bothered to make. And here it was, somehow circling back. When her brother came through the door later that afternoon, dropping his backpack on the floor, Anna hugged him without explanation. He laughed nervously, not understanding, but hugged her back. For the first time in weeks, the heaviness in her chest lifted just a little. Maybe James had been right. Maybe kindness did find its way back, even when you least expected it. The following Monday, Anna stood outside Jefferson High, clutching the strap of her worn purse so tightly her knuckles ached. The building loomed in front of her, brick walls weathered by years of use, the faint sound of students echoing from inside. She had walked past this school countless times but never thought she would step through its doors. Her stomach churned with nerves. She wasn't a teacher. She wasn't polished or professional in the way she imagined they wanted. She was just a grocery store cashier trying to keep her family afloat. But now, here she was, about to walk into an interview that could change everything. She took a breath and pushed the door open. The hallway smelled faintly of pencil shavings and floor wax, lockers lining the walls. Students hurried past, laughing and talking, their backpacks bouncing as they moved. For a moment, Anna felt like she had stepped into another life, one she didn't quite belong to. A secretary guided her to the English department office. She sat in a small chair, hands folded in her lap, waiting. Her mind raced. What if I'm not enough? What if they realise I don't belong here? The door opened and in walked James Harris. His familiar smile eased the tension in her chest. "Anna," he said warmly, "you made it." She blinked in surprise. "You work here still?" He shook his head. "No, I retired years ago, but I still stop by now and then. When I heard they needed help, I thought of you. You have something most people don't. Empathy. That matters more than you realise." Before she could reply, another teacher entered and invited her in for the interview. James gave her a reassuring nod, the kind of nod that said, "You've got this." Inside, the questions came quickly. What experience did she have? Why was she interested in the role? Anna answered as honestly as she could. She spoke about her love of books as a child, about helping her brother with essays, about the importance of being seen and encouraged. She didn't dress it up, she spoke from the heart. When it was over, she stepped back into the hallway, breathless, unsure if she had said enough. James was waiting on the bench across from the office. "How did it go?" he asked. Anna exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but I told the truth." James smiled, his eyes kind. "That's more than most people manage, and it's exactly why I knew you belonged here." For the first time in weeks, Anna felt something stir inside her. Hope. Fragile, but real. Anna's first week at Jefferson High felt like stepping into a world that moved faster than she could catch up to. The classrooms buzzed with restless energy, students tapping pencils, whispering jokes, flipping through textbooks as if the words inside were nothing but noise. On her first day assisting in the English department, she stood by the back wall, clutching a stack of papers, unsure where to fit in. The lead teacher, a woman with kind eyes but a commanding voice, introduced her briefly. Most of the students barely glanced up. Anna felt the familiar sting of being invisible, the same sting she had seen on James's face in the grocery store. But then something small shifted. During a group assignment, one boy sat apart from the others, staring at a blank sheet of paper. His shoulders slumped, his face guarded. Anna hesitated, then quietly walked over and crouched beside him. "Having a hard time getting started?" she asked gently. He shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Doesn't matter, I'm not good at this stuff." Anna remembered her own brother at that same kitchen table, convinced he would never measure up. She slid the paper closer and said, "How about you just tell me your idea and I'll help you put it into words? Everyone has something worth saying." Slowly, the boy began to talk. At first, his words tumbled out awkwardly, but Anna listened without rushing him, nodding, encouraging. By the time the bell rang, he had written half a page, and there was the faintest spark of pride in his eyes. That night, walking home, Anna felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. She wasn't just scanning items at a register anymore. She was helping someone believe they weren't invisible. When she got home, her brother asked how her day went. Anna smiled, a real smile this time. "It was good," she said. "Better than I expected." And when she sat by the window later, listening to the rain return in soft drizzles, she thought of James. She thought of his words. Kindness has a way of circling back. For the first time, she believed she was standing in the middle of that circle. One rainy afternoon, near the end of the school year, Anna was helping in the cafeteria when she noticed a girl standing off to the side of the line. Her tray was empty, her hands shoved deep into her hoodie pocket. When the cashier asked for payment, the girl mumbled something and lowered her head. "I'll just skip today," she whispered, stepping back. Anna saw the way her shoulders curled inward, the way she tried to make herself small under the weight of other students' stares. It was the same posture she remembered on James in the grocery store, the same one she'd seen in her mother when the medicine ran out. Without hesitation, Anna walked over. "Hey," she said gently, "why don't you grab something warm? Don't worry about it." The girl looked up, startled. "I don't have—" Anna smiled softly. "It's taken care of." She slid a few bills across the counter, enough to cover a meal, and placed a sandwich and milk on the girl's tray. The girl's eyes glistened as she whispered, "Thank you." Anna's chest tightened, but in the best way. "No need to thank me," she said. "Just eat, all right? You deserve that much." As the girl walked away clutching her tray, Anna glanced toward the doorway. Standing there, leaning quietly against the frame, was James. His jacket was damp from the rain, his eyes steady and warm. He didn't say a word. He just gave a small nod, the kind that carried more meaning than any speech ever could. Gratitude, pride, and a silent promise all wrapped into that single gesture. Anna felt her throat catch. For a moment, the noise of the cafeteria faded, and it was just the two of them, an old teacher who once thought he had been forgotten, and a young woman who had once believed she was invisible. Both of them had been wrong. That night, back at the apartment, Anna sat by the window listening to the rain tap against the glass. She thought about the girl in the cafeteria, about James's quiet nod, about the way life had carried her from a grocery store register to a place where she could give someone else the same dignity she once fought to protect. And she realised something simple but powerful. Kindness doesn't vanish. It doesn't fade away or get lost in the noise of the world. It circles back again and again in ways you never expect. Anna closed her eyes, a tired smile on her face, and whispered into the quiet room, "One act at a time. True kindness doesn't need recognition or reward. A small act of compassion can echo further than we imagine, often circling back when we need it most." Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time and presence here. If this touched you, please give it a like and subscribe to support the channel. I look forward to seeing you again in the next story, right here on Rain Inside.